Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
And away we go. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. This is The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Before we get rolling, let's welcome another affiliate, WRNI AM in Providence, Rhode Island. WRNI 1290 AM in Providence. Wow, great to be part of the WRNI radio family and their weekly programming schedule. Really appreciate you bringing the Conspiracy Show on board. This is our first affiliate in Little Rhodey, as it's called. I love Rhode Island's motto. Very simple, succinct, to the point, inspiring, hope. That's their state motto. All right, let me ask you something. What do you consider to be the greatest threat facing Western civilization? Is it Islamic fundamentalism? Russia? China? The disparity between the 1% and the rest of us? Environmental degradation? Climate change? Some of you may be familiar with Elon Musk. He's the Tesla and SpaceX founder, who is occasionally compared to comic book hero Tony Stark. Well, Elon is worried about a new villain that could threaten humanity, specifically the potential creation of an artificial intelligence that is radically smarter than humans, with somewhat catastrophic results. Anyway, Musk has been talking about superintelligence, paths, dangers, strategies, which is a book by Nick Bostrom at the University of Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute. And we're going to talk about that tonight, not with Elon Musk, but with an advanced tech expert by the name of Eric Schiffer. He'll join me tonight to discuss the potential of a robot apocalypse. What will it be like when many of us are working alongside robots? And that future is much closer and potentially more dangerous than many of us think. But first, last week I introduced one of the speakers, one of the remarkable speakers that will be appearing at my upcoming conference, Follow the Truth, the Conspiracy Show Summit, which is happening this November the 16th, at the Regent Theater in Oshawa. Professor Ronald Mallett joined us last week. He'll be speaking about time travel and his theoretical time machine. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to another remarkable gentleman who will also be appearing at Follow the Truth. Donald R. Schmidt is the former co-director of the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, where he served as director of special investigations for 10 years. Prior to that, he was a special investigator for the late Dr. J. Hynek and the art director for the International UFO Reporter. He graduated from MATC with a degree in commercial art and graduated cum laude from Concordia University with a degree in liberal arts. He's presently taking this is an older bio, actually. I think he has a graduate degree in criminal justice. He is the author of dozens of articles about UFOs, as well as the co-author of The Roswell Dig Diaries, Sci-Fi Declassified, The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell, Witness to Roswell, and Inside the Real Area 51, The Secret History of Wright-Patterson. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the Conspiracy Show, Donald Schmidt. Don, how are you?
Well, hello, Richard. So good to be back with you again, and thank you for all those kind words.
And really looking forward to sharing the stage with you again Sunday, November the 16th at the Regent Theater in Oshawa, Ontario. So what can we expect? I mean, obviously we're just going to spend a few moments here with a few of the highlights, but you're going to be presenting. Obviously, Roswell will be front and center.
Yes, it will be, and we will also be focusing on the aftermath, the history that even most within ufology, if one removes Roswell from the equation, it paints this picture of the government just floundering around, and I talk specifically the United States government, and going through their special UFO projects, Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book, and that they just never really, got with it really, really got going as far as a legitimate investigation, when in reality, after Roswell, they had the physical evidence, as evidenced even within 2 months after Roswell in September of 1947, when then General Nathan Twining, who was the head of the Air Material Command at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, actually signed off on a letter where he stated the phenomena was something real and not visionary or fictitious. So we're going to, demonstrate that if one inserts Roswell, in other words, that if history, as far as the United States government, is based on the fact that in 47 they did indeed recover physical evidence demonstrating that we are not alone, that there is an intelligence beyond planet Earth, and it had a mishap involving a crash. We recovered the technology, and what if after all this time we still can't find the on button? That the cover-up remains a cover-up of ignorance, that during these past 67 years that all they can do is bury it, hide it away, crate it up, prevent future generations from ever learning the truth. And as a result, we are in the midst of this ongoing, self-perpetuating cover-up that if not for those of us, at least within the civilian organizations, researchers and investigators who are devoting their lives to unraveling this truth, the public wouldn't have any access, wouldn't know anything about this subject.
If there's anyone living or dead that knows more about the Roswell UFO crash, more than you, Don, I don't know who that person might be. How many digs, or how many archaeological digs have you led at the actual UFO crash site?
There have been 4, and I have led all 4 of them. We are presently planning on a 5th for early next year. I say early, I mean the latter part of spring. And the next time we're actually going to work away from the site, the actual site, miles away. We're going to follow the natural runoff, the erosion from the area, and where it deposits, where everything through all of these decades has been depositing all these years, with the hope that something may have been moved unbeknownst to anyone, and it needs to be excavated. We confirmed the gouge, for example. Witnesses have described for many times taking us out to the site where immediately after the incident something had left a furrow about 10 foot wide, hundreds of feet long, and something had impacted. And clearly a weather balloon of any sort doesn't leave an impact site. And everything has filled in through the years. And in 2002, when we had a backhoe, archaeologists actually crossed perpendicularly the very site. And just below the surface there it was, the symmetrical V.
Wow.
And precisely where the witnesses told us. And for the first time, it demonstrated that there indeed was an impact. Something had slammed across the ground, had skipped across the terrain for hundreds of feet. And there's no documentation, no evidence, no eyewitness testimony to suggest anything else has happened out there except the crash of a genuine flying saucer.
Any other artifacts? Have any other artifacts turned up in the previous 4 digs at Roswell?
More of a prosaic type, Richard, and that would be military buttons that would date in the 1940s, metal buttons with military markings, insignias on them. The bottom of a lugged rubber sole of a boot. The ranchers, the cowboys out there, all wear cowboy boots, leather-soled boots.
Sure.
And these are army boots once again, as it certainly appears to us. There have been metal fragments. We have found fragments since 2002. Some are not, especially on a radioisotope chart. Specific elements jump off. They should not be there. They are not of any known manufacturer that has ever been registered or patented here on planet Earth. So those are interesting. But let me say, Richard, what I'm more curious about, what I'm becoming at least more amused by, is that someone appears to be contaminating the site within the past 5 years.
Oh, my.
Not only have nails been sprayed out all over certain areas of the site, but more and more fragments of just very plain aluminum, which were not there 5 years ago. And now metal detection is picking this up on a regular basis. So we're finding way too much. We're finding things that were never out there before. And again, it's as though someone is trying to not only contaminate, but totally discredit any future findings on our part. And let me say, and I will also demonstrate this in my talk, that the military, specifically the United States Air Force, has been out there repeatedly since 1947. Not only immediately after the incident, for years after heavy rains, especially checking out to make sure they had every last piece of physical evidence, but even within recent years, ranchers, ranch hands have caught Air Force personnel out there doing who knows what.
That's a lot of time and effort just to recover a weather balloon, Don.
Precisely. And why should they be interested after over 50 years in the physical remains of very off-the-shelf material of neoprene rubber and wooden sticks and reflective foil and masking tape? This is out in the middle of the desert.
Sure. I'm so thrilled that you're going to be part of Follow the Truth, the Conspiracy Show Summit. And what I had intended for this conference is not to preach to the choir, but also to get this out to a mainstream audience, people that might be interested in UFOs and ETs, but are not necessarily, for example, disclosure advocates. They have kind of they think something's going on, and this is, to me, a great entry point for these people is to hear a talk about Roswell, because when it comes to UFO and ETs and ufology, really all roads lead to Roswell, don't they?
Yes. All roads lead to Roswell. All roads lead from Roswell to Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio. It's where all the official UFO investigations took place, and as demonstrated in our new book, that is where the wreckage and the bodies all were transported immediately after the crash. So we'll be going through all that, all the new eyewitness testimony, all the interesting stories about Wright-Pat and the underground facilities, the vaults, the hangars that have always been denied by the government.
Can't wait
to present that as a court case that we would win in any court of law.
Can't wait, Don. Thank you so much. All right, that is Don Schmitt. Follow the Truth, the Conspiracy Show Summit, 6 amazing speakers and an all-day conference, Sunday, November the 16th, Regent Theater, followthetruth.tv, or you can call the Regent Theater box office at 905-721-3399, 905-721-3399. Here's a little tip. Use the code word Roswell and receive a 25% discount. When we come back, are robots more dangerous than nukes? You're listening to The Conspiracy Show. Stay a while, won't you?
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Welcome back. Eric Schiffer is chairman and CEO of Patriarch Equity and DigitalMarketing.com, and he is a Renaissance man in the truest sense of the word. He's a best-selling author, a successful entrepreneur, a mainstay in New York, London, and L.A. high society. He's founded 2 companies listed on Inc. magazine's 500 and 5,000 fastest-growing companies, and serves as a trusted advisor to multiple Fortune 500 CEOs, presidents of countries, foreign leaders, and Forbes 400 billionaires. Eric Schiffer, welcome to The Conspiracy Show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Richard. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Earlier in the program, I was referring to Elon Musk from Tesla and SpaceX,
yes,
and also, of course, Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, Strategies.
Yes.
Do you share their fears about artificial intelligence and robots?
I do, and have been speaking about it for some time, and in fact preceded Ellen's warnings about becoming the biological bootloader for digital superintelligence, and also I think also Hawking's, who has both commented about the positive aspect of what is this coming superintelligence, and also the fact that it can be society's greatest destructive force, not unlike what nukes are and other major societal potential harms to the continued life. And this is not really theoretical anymore. It's a question of time. Some are saying that the most recent technologies are very close. Others are saying 5 to 10, 15 years. Artificial intelligence exists. I mean, it exists in many different forms. We know this, and we know we've readily beat at chess with our greatest chess champions at Jeopardy. We are using it in health and medical scenarios. We're using it on the military side. So it's not a question of the capability. It's just a question of at what point does it become self-sustaining, reflective, and can we as a society build in safe harbor elements that can control or place into what arguably has been encoded in us, which is a sense of morality.
Well, let me get you to just to say what it is. What is the nature of the threat, then, with artificial intelligence? Why do we need to fear it?
At the right point, artificial intelligence begins to become self-aware, can connect with others, and in the interests of humankind can take measures into its own hands using robotics that may seem to help society or seem to help human beings, but can end up becoming the destruction of human beings. So, for instance, it may launch nuclear weapons. It could shut down grids for electricity or shut down communication capabilities. It could begin to dig or construct projects that would, in the interest of being able to protect against humans, end up hurting humans. And so this is the concept that people are concerned about, and certainly intelligent, thoughtful people, and also people that have seen other like scenarios. And when you consider the concept of, even on the thematic side, this concept of Skynet, which was this Terminator-like machine that was eventually began to think and plan and have a system where they began to take over. It is not unreasonable to formulate what hello?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable to formulate this next generation situation.
And this is what this pinnacle, this point of no return, is what we refer to as the singularity, correct?
I'm sorry, I missed that. You cut out. I apologize.
All right. This point of no return, when artificial intelligence, I suppose, begins to look at humans as the enemy, is this what they refer to as the singularity?
Well, this is singularity, but that doesn't necessarily presuppose that it's going to be the enemy. In other words, singularity means that robots at some point begin, or artificial intelligence begins to supersede human intelligence. That in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can be great for society. The question is, at what point does it supersede human intelligence and then begin to have the ability to think on its own and can pivot and do things that could end up being the destruction of the human race. And we have no guidelines for this. We have no associations that are formed to ensure that the construction of artificial intelligence has some level of what we would consider to be morality, or a structure that would prevent this kind of thinking and action from occurring. And there's certainly no regulation that looks at it, or even any monitoring right now. And that's what I'm calling for. I'm calling for some level of structure to this to encode what would be a digital morality into these systems, so that we don't get into a situation that 5, 10, 15 years from now we can't fathom, because the machine is that much more intelligent, and we can't control because the genie's out of the bag. And to presuppose that we're going to be able to figure this out really undermines the whole premise of how machine thinking can evolve. For instance, it's not necessarily going to be a type of intelligence that we may know. And in other words, it can be a far more complex form, not unlike how a human may perceive the ratio between themselves and an ant's ability to think.
Right.
And so to the extent that we decide that we want to build a hotel in a certain part of the world, the last person or thing that we intervene with or to check how it may impact would be, ants or insects or even what they feel on the matter. Well, this is the same scenario. Is that when you get into these 2 and 3 level potential conceptual areas, you can have these kind of situations in which humans are not consulted. Humans are a byproduct, and the robots and artificial intelligence can think that because it's in their best interest, ultimately as a society, to protect humans, it's okay to destroy X amount. And again, without a structure in place, we risk this. And this is, when Kurzweil says 15 years to 20 years, and when some of these other great minds are saying, we really need to look at this because this could be the worst type of invention from a life preservation standpoint, this is not far off. And then when we consider what's already going on in the military, I mean, the military has devices now, at least on the U.S. side, that are both of a robotic nature and of a superintelligence nature that would make your jaw drop. We're talking about robots that are not far off from what we've seen in the movies on the Terminator side. We're talking about mechanical horses that can carry tremendous payloads up hills. We're talking about cheetahs that can run at speeds far faster than most animals to track down things. And we're talking about intelligence on an artificial level that can supersede some of the things that we've seen, certainly on the IBM chess and Jeopardy level, in the ability to predict future events.
Advanced tech expert Eric Schiffer is here. He's chairman, CEO of Patriarch Equity and Digital Marketing.com. Now, Eric, your companies, they utilize some pretty cutting-edge technology. Does artificial intelligence or robotics enter into any of your commercial interests?
We have technology that we have built on the artificial intelligence side, and I'm using it much like I think Musk is using it, in that he's investing to be aware and to be close to what's going on so that he's not surprised. And that's much the way that I'm doing it too, to be on the forefront, to ensure that we have a seat at the table, that at some point there isn't going to be this quantum set of discoveries that can give companies this huge set of strategic advantages. Clearly, Google is a big player in this game. And that raises a whole host of questions when you have an organization that has so much intellectual property, and that intellectual property can serve strategic and decision-making capabilities when those strategic decisions are what causes you to win in the marketplace and causes you to have tremendous power from a lobbying perspective and from a public policy perspective.
And who are the main drivers in the development of artificial intelligence? Is it the military? Is it biotech? Who?
Military and private industry. DARPA on the military side, within the U.S., is a big player in this arena because of the benefits to preservation of the nation, and also to ensure that there isn't an upstart terrorist organization that is investing in this. And look, you've seen what ISIS has done with the minimal amount of technology capability that it has. It absolutely has invested in some low-level forms of artificial intelligence and programming capability in some of the things that it's doing on Twitter, low level. And so, the military on the U.S. side wants wants to stay ahead and needs to protect itself. But you're also seeing in the private industry side, largely Google and then many startups that are making specific vertical by vertical investments in artificial intelligence and in robotics. And then it brings up another question on the robotics side, which is what will happen to capitalism and what will happen to society and in general when you've got this huge set of strategic shifts that will happen, largely ones that will relate to manufacturing and some on the service side. So, for instance, when you consider back in the Industrial Revolution, 40% of the workforce were on the farm until some of the inventions that came in the form of changes to how farming was made more efficient, more productive. And then people moved into the professional services arena and the services arena in general. Well, services has always been one that was considered that would protected because of the human element. But when artificial intelligence gets to the point where it can encode emotional intelligence and take some of the best and smartest minds on the emotional intelligence side and begin to license that technology to machines and to robots and to software that can be transferred to other people to many different applications, suddenly you've now made what would cost someone $40,000 a year as a business to hire on the front end side to service clients, replaceable with a machine that can connect emotionally, that can read people's heart rate, their breathing, their pupil dilation, the tone of their voice, and ensure that they give them what they're looking for and have the memory and the recall to be able to do that with precision. It's already happening, by the way.
Indeed. I mean, we're in the midst of another jobless recovery. I mean, where are the jobs? Well, they're being performed by robots.
Well, it's beginning, and where it's interestingly happening is also in the areas that you wouldn't consider. So, for instance, China, one of the biggest manufacturers on the Chinese side for iPhones has experimented recently with the most recent rev of the iPhone 6, and they have replaced about 5,000 to 10,000 workers with machines that are doing it at a fraction of the cost without fainting, without needing to eat, without needing to go to the bathroom. And so they're kicking out a lot more efficiency. But it brings up a whole host of questions when that begins to scale about the ability for that country to stay stabilized when putting people to work and ensuring that people are earning some form of a wage has been a way for the Communist Party in tacking over to capitalism to maintain control and maintain some level of societal balance. In the United States and in Canada and in other countries where the recovery has been happening but not as fast as we would like, there are these questions, which is how are we going to keep people working? And what are we going to do when the robots and artificial intelligence begins to build steam with companies who are looking to cut costs and looking for efficiency? Will there be a public policy component that will have to be put in place? Will there need to be a tax on these robots to ensure that we're offsetting? Will people need to be retrained? I mean, ultimately, the future worker will need a combination of both very specialized skills as well as great emotional intelligence skills to supersede the ability that the robots will have.
All right, Eric, stay where you are. We'll come back and continue to discuss robots and artificial intelligence. More dangerous than nukes? Eric Schiffer, Chairman, CEO of Patriarch Equity and DigitalMarketing.com. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Serrett's Strange Planet.
Welcome back. Eric Schiffer is with us, advanced tech expert. Eric, I want to get to microchipping in a few moments, but I want to stay with robots for a few more moments. There was an interesting research project conducted by Pew Research and Ellen University, and they interviewed or they questioned about 1,800 industry experts about the role of robots, robot technology in the future. Will they create more jobs? Will they take away jobs? And here's something that just jumped out at me. It says nearly all the experts said things like driverless cars, robotic doctors and nurses, and intelligent digital agents would be part of daily life by 2025. Really? Robotic doctors by 2025? Do you concur with that?
Much sooner.
Wow.
That's a very conservative perspective. And, driverless cars, they're already here.
They are, yes. But the doctors...
This is nothing new. This is, some would say they've been here for 10 years with some of the way drivers drive. But,
Indeed.
So these are not far off. They're very close. When you have a guy who's such a visionary like Musk, who has said that Terminator-like scenarios like the ones I'm describing can be absolutely created from AI, and who, as I said, has invested in his own artificial intelligence company, not necessarily for investment purposes, but he wants to ensure that he's close to it. He wants to keep an eye on the technology, as I do, to ensure that these things don't run amok. What you're doing when you're getting involved on the artificial intelligence side, and what the concern is that these machines will then begin to develop what is like a neocortex for us, which is this ability to sense and perceive and to be able to have conscious thought. And at that point, it then can form alliances with other machines and other systems. And depending upon what the underlying code is, it can have the ability to update itself and to gain intelligence and to get smarter. And there are already other programs like this on the artificial intelligence side that have indexed far more data than what Google has, and has it in a much easier to pull matrix. So the systems are there. They're in disparate parts. They have not all been strung together. They don't have the full conscious capabilities yet, but they will.
Robots are being used increasingly as caregivers in Japan, helping the elderly climb stairs and so forth. Are we going to wake up one morning in the not-too-distant future and read about one of these robots turning on some elderly person in Japan and have the first robot homicide?
I don't think you're going to see it in those contexts. I think where you'll see it will be in areas that involve mistakes initially, and then in areas that will include likely terrorism, and then at some point you'll see it where these systems will run amok and will take over in certain verticals, and they'll have to be shut down. And so, again, it comes down to what are we going to do as a society, given that we have right now, before the birthing of this superintelligence, the ability to control it, where we may not have the ability to control it at a later point. And we have a responsibility for the future generations to at least get at the table and begin to encode some level of what I would consider to be neocortex-driven cyber morality.
How do you get the attention of politicians who are, let's face it, scientifically illiterate? How do you make the case to Congress, for example, that we need to act now?
I think you do it through the prism of the military and through the prism of ensuring that we're protecting what could be the future generations. And we look at it, again, through factual and anecdotal scenarios. And we begin to try to do this through the private sector initially. I'm not suggesting regulation. I think that's the last resort. I would suggest that we have some level of monitoring that could even be overseen by the military or overseen by different forms of what would be considered to be in the United States Homeland Security, and in Canada similar. And perhaps we start in that fashion through leadership on the robotics side, and with people at Google, and with people that would be at Musk's company and others who can sit down and say, look, let's look out 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we know, and 15 years ago, when we know that this is very likely, and let's put together a cogent, responsible plan that considers the impact of our future men and women and future generations.
You mentioned Ray Kurzweil a little while ago, and I've talked to a number of advocates of the transhumanist movement on this program, and a part of their message scares me, quite frankly. You know, the merging of humans with robotics in some quest for perhaps immortality. Is that a concern? I mean, is the transhumanist movement perhaps fueling some of the advancements in AI that we really need to be concerned about?
I don't think that's fueling it. I think it's complementing to some level, but that's a different set of motives and drives, and certainly a different set of individuals who are making those investments. It's quite fascinating, and really the premise is that by leveraging nanotechnology and leveraging robotics and also leveraging some artificial intelligence, but largely the robotic side with nanotechnology, you can rebuild the cells in your body, and you can rebuild the organs and literally stamp out new organs and live 150, 200, 250 years old. This is all very theoretically possible, and again, a lot of the pieces are already in place, and I think it will happen. I also think that there will be this convergence between technology that may eventually have an organic form and humans, and so, you know, if they were considered to be the Borgs, right? This is coming too. The concern beyond that, though, is this, or I guess parallel to that, is this other side, which is what Stephen Hawking and Musk and myself have warned about, which is that artificial intelligence, and this is Hawking's talking, has the potential to be the downfall of mankind.
All right, listen, let me jump in here, Eric. We'll take a time out. When we come back, we can finish.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
We have a few moments remaining with Eric Schiffer, advanced technology expert, as we discuss the possibility of a robot apocalypse, if you will. Artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence with catastrophic consequences. And you mentioned before the break, Stephen Hawking has weighed in on this and also voiced similar concerns. Did you want to finish up on that point before we move on to microchipping humans?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that was mentioned, certainly by him and by others, was that not only does it have the potential to be the downfall of mankind, you're talking about this could be the last of mankind. And again, that's Hawking. I mean, this is not some uninformed person that doesn't have the respect of the scientific community that is saying these things. And another research fellow at the Future of Humanity Institute, Daniel Dewey, who had said that, the problem is you're building a very powerful intelligent system that's your enemy, and you're putting it in a cage. And look, to me, you can do certain things with matter in order to achieve a goal, and with systems like what we're talking about, they may want to involve intermediate steps, like tearing apart, in the interest of making use solar panels, tearing apart the Earth, and in the process destroying a lot of people and or resources that could be beneficial to society. So these are things that again need to be programmed in, things that need to be ensured that we have protection against, because a superintelligence may not take our interests into consideration in these situations, just like we don't take root systems or ant colonies into account when we go to construct a building.
Well, but if we do this right, I mean, if we do it correctly and avoid these pitfalls, artificial intelligence, robotics, I mean, the potential is to mankind is unimaginably huge.
It makes nukes seem like squirt guns. I mean, you're talking about the ability for something that is so much smarter, almost commensurate with what we would interpret God, for those that believe in a higher power, to be like.
All right. I want to talk in the remaining moments about something else I know that you're concerned about, and that is microchipping. All Americans will be microchipped in 3 years. Is this your prediction?
Well, this was an NBC News report, and this floated around for some time, and the concept was that in order to track for both protection and also for benefit, the government was considering this. Now, there's been multiple reports since that question the validity of that report, but there are people that are already doing this now, and they're doing it for comfort and also convenience. So, for instance, they're injecting themselves with chips so that when they walk near their front door, or if they decide to go into certain rooms in the house, then certain pre-programmed things will happen. If they go into their office, then certain things will happen on certain days because it knows it's there. And so this is, again, a benefit of having those kind of things that would occur. It also is a downside because it falls into the area of governmental super control and the concept also on the biblical side of the mark of the beast. I mean, these are age-old stories that are beginning to potentially become real.
One of the benefits, of course, is, in the way that it's being sort of peddled to us is, well, if you have an aging parent, maybe someone with dementia, or if you have a small child, wouldn't you want to protect them? Wouldn't you want to have them chipped so that you can track their whereabouts and they could be recovered in the event that an elderly person goes wandering or a child disappears? I mean, we're being sold the positive, the upside.
Sure.
But we're not being told, the potential downside. Or those people that do warn against it are labeled a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing kooks.
Well, here's the thing. Those same people can also be tracked by predators. They can also be tracked by extortionists. They can also be tracked by people who want to kidnap and then ransom. So these are the flip side arguments of those same arguments. And yes, there are positives, but until there's enough safe harbor and safe protection against people using it in an improper way or a way that could create tremendous pain to a family or to loved ones, then certainly there should not be a mandatory implication. This should always be a discretionary choice.
I believe the American Medical Association has even given their tacit approval to such implants. Why? I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, there is the upside. If someone is wheeled into an emergency room, they're unconscious. Such a chip would have, without having to contact their next of kin, they would have a list of allergies that could be accessed or that would be accessible on such a chip. But we also know from chips that are used in dogs, for example. These have produced cancers in animals. I can't figure out why the American Medical Association would be jumping on board.
Well, I think it's for those reasons. There was a product called the VeriChip, which they've now rebranded Positive ID, and this was an actual FDA-approved human implantable microchip. It was marketed by this company and had received approval back in 2004, but it was discontinued in 2010. And there were concerns about just what you're saying. I think you can get around the protection on the cancer side. The bigger question, though, is should public policy mandate it? And on the discretionary side, will there be enough safe harbor to protect against people usurping it and using it for nefarious reasons? And then could you imagine that everyone's chipped and suddenly artificial intelligence gets to the point where it runs amok, and it can track everyone down. And so, I mean, these kind of doomsday scenarios they're not completely outlandish. And so there needs to be fail-safes in all of these things.
RFID chips are now ubiquitous. They are implanted in virtually every consumer product that you can imagine. And there's an upside in terms of inventory control and so forth. It's great for retailers and wholesalers and so forth. People are concerned, though, that these RFID chips one day could be used to track us, maybe through the one that's implanted in your pair of sneakers or so. How far away are we from those types of chips being tracked, let's say, from a satellite? Because now we're told only from a few yards away.
The satellite capabilities can be there, but what would happen is it would be a localized system. So, for instance, yes, it's only a few yards away, but what is coming is what Bill Joy had, who was the famous CTO that helped to create Java and other things at Sun Microsystems, had always talked about, which is this pervasiveness. And when you have systems that can measure these RFID chips at micro levels, then you just boot that up a larger level, and you can scale it all the way up to a satellite, and it can track everything. And so the capabilities for this to be tracked, whether someone has an RFID on a container that's floating across the Pacific Ocean from China or on someone's sneakers, is all, in theory, the technology is there. It just needs to be strung together. Some of the implants that they're talking about, though, would have even greater capability and reach, and some of the technology that's being invented now in Silicon Valley has greater capacity as well. Again, pause should be put forth on all of these things. I don't think you're going to see this happen on a human level in the near future, unless it's a discretionary call.
And what do you think would be the triggering mechanism where the government might make it mandatory that all citizens be chipped?
Well, I think you could see it in the cases of wholesale immigration challenges or terrorism. So to the extent that terrorism became such a big issue, and it was infiltrated, for instance, in the United States and in Canada, and we needed to ensure the ability to know who is who. I could see it in those situations, but again, it's pretty remote.
And would you be opposed to chipping Alzheimer patients?
I think that there's advantages in those kind of things, and as long as there's some protection on the security side. So there need to be several layers of protection to ensure that these individuals that have access to the RFID passwords and the identifications cannot, on the inside, take advantage. So, for instance, you don't have a rogue employee that's tied in with a bunch of bad guys or bad actors, or you don't have a potential break-in through a Russian gang that is able to steal these codes and then targets these individuals. There would need to be multiple layers of protection.
And what about the chips now? For example, we have these enhanced driver's licenses where we're told if you want to go into the United States, for example, and you have these enhanced driver's license, they can actually, you're 3 or 4 cars back in the lineup at customs, and by the time you get there, they've already read your driver's license. Yeah. All the information is there. Should we be concerned? Should we be fighting back against these enhanced driver's licenses?
These are intrusive, and fighting back, I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. I do think that if they're intrusive, I think that they could be used again by the military and others that want to do surveillance. I don't think they are now, but certainly they have the capability to. But again, good luck trying to unwind that. That will be much tougher. But you're right; these are already at play right now, and certainly being used, and for the benefit of protecting the homeland at this point.
Eric, I really appreciate your time tonight. I've enjoyed our conversation.
I enjoyed it.
Leave us with a website.
Good questions.
Leave us with a website.
You can go to Eric Schiffer, ERICSCHIFFER.com, and follow me on Twitter, and you'll hear more of these kinds of things. I know that you come in and host for George Norrie. I was on George's show about 10 days ago. And
yes, I heard you on
that's
there.
available for those that missed it. And I also, if you're interested in business-related articles and what have you, you can also check out some of my pieces on Forbes.
Again, appreciate your time, Eric, and I hope we can do this again.
I would like that. Have a great night. Take care, Richard.
All right, bye-bye. Eric Schiffer. My website, richardsyrett.com, your portal to The Conspiracy Show. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Syrett. And as always, follow the truth.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Pull up a stool and warm yourself next to the electric bonfire. This is The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett, and I thank you for inviting me into your home. And once again, I want to welcome our new affiliate, WRNI 1290 AM in Providence, Rhode Island. I hope The Conspiracy Show and WRNI 1290 have a long, happy, and mutually prosperous relationship. Hope. That's the state motto of Rhode Island, by the way. Hope. In just a few moments, we're going to make the phone lines available to you for an evening of open lines, and I always look forward to the opportunity to speak directly with you on the program. We don't do it very often, but tonight's the night, and we will roll out the phone numbers in just a few moments. And it will be up to you to decide where you want to steer this program. Conspiracies, political subterfuge, geopolitics, UFOs, ETs, cryptozoology, alternative everything. But first, I want to welcome a great friend to the program into our studio. If you're in the Greater Toronto area, you probably are very familiar with a certain bookstore, Conspiracy Culture. It's an independently owned source for information on conspiratorial and spiritual subject matter. And while they have a storefront in Toronto, they also have a web store. We'll talk about that as well. And I wanted to bring Conspiracy Culture co-founder and co-owner Patrick White into the studio, as we've done from time to time over the years, to share some of his recommendations for those of you who are interested in the subject matter, and what a vast field it is. Conspiracies, the paranormal, the spiritual, alternative energy, alternative health, UFOs, ETs. You'll find it all in book form, DVD form, magazine form at Conspiracy Culture. So here, with another installment of his Essential Conspiracy Reading List, is, I say, a good friend of the program, Patrick White. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Richard, thanks for having me, buddy.
My pleasure. First of all, as I mentioned, you've got the storefront here in Toronto, but for all of our listeners in the U.S. as well that may not get into Toronto, you've also got, you're also selling these books online. Can you tell us a little bit about the web store?
Yeah, right now it's still in its early stages, so it's a fairly modest web shop, but we do have some select items available for purchase for those who are located in cyberspace. So we have some, choice titles available, and we've priced them very competitively. So regardless as to where you look around the web, we feel that you'll still feel confident purchasing the items through our shop. Okay,
let's talk about some of the must-have titles. For those that are just maybe getting into this field and they want a primer, or they want one of the classics, if we're talking about conspiracies, lay a few titles on us.
Sure. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more classic that you would need for your shelf, obviously 1984 by George Orwell, which was originally published in 1949. Great book. Gets into public manipulation, government surveillance, perpetual war, independent thinking equating to thought crimes. Great book. Titles like Rockefeller File, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, written by Gary Allen. The Carroll Quigley tome, Tragedy and Hope, which was originally published in 1966, which pretty much covers 1880 to 1963 and focuses on the economic problems brought about by World War I.
That was my sort of entree or entry into this whole field, was Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley, who was Bill Clinton, President Clinton's professor at Georgetown University. And he had, from what I understand, access He was sort of the Rockefeller family's official historian and chronicler, so he had access to all of their files and information. And I mean, he wasn't writing about these secret societies as a warning. He basically subscribed to a lot of their ideas, did he not?
Oh, for sure. And I can only imagine what he was privy to, being able to access all those materials. So The Tragedy and Hope is definitely a great book. We carry his Anglo-American establishment as well. Other titles, for example, World Without Cancer and The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. We also carry Transformation of America and Access Denied by Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, which is essentially a documented autobiography of a victim who was put through government mind control programs, i.e. MK Ultra and Project Monarch. So we carry a lot of essential reading. Another book that would be considered must-have for the shelf would be Rule by Secrecy by Jim Marrs. He was just here in Toronto. You helped host the show. It was fantastic.
It was remarkable, yes.
Yeah, so those are just some of the titles that you would, pretty much have to have for your shelf. There's been some recent releases that have come out that are definitely worth taking a look at if you wanted to discuss some of those.
Yes, please. What's sort of number one on your list of new releases in the conspiracy field?
Well, I was just up north with a bunch of UFO guys at a retreat last night. So on the topic, Richard Dolan has a book that's been recently released called UFOs for the 21st Century. Fantastic book. For anybody that's read anything by Richard Dolan, this just is another one of his tremendous books. Gets into ancient aliens, gets into modern encounters, abductions, people who channel alien entities, gets into sort of like the bizarre sciences and the black budget programs, why the cover-up is essentially bound to end really soon, and what he foresees in the not-too-distant future with disclosure and pretty much the whole UFO phenomenon. So for anybody who's interested in UFOs or aliens, regardless as to your level of interest, this book here would be, I would recommend it for sure.
That's UFOs for the 21st Century Mind by Richard Dolan.
Richard Dolan, correct.
Yeah, and this is the author of two real seminal works, UFOs in the National Security State, and he takes it all the way from the sort of the mid-1940s up into, I think Volume 2 goes into the 70s, doesn't it?
Yes. And then he also wrote the AD, the After Disclosure, as well, with Bryce Zabel.
Exactly, yeah. Richard Dolan is a phenomenal writer and a phenomenal speaker. It's interesting that Dolan and Grant Cameron as well, they've, these were sort of, Dolan is a trained historian, and they were all, sort of facts and documents, and of course Grant Cameron has scoured all the presidential libraries, but the two of them now have sort of taken it to the next level, where it's not necessarily just about, the documents. It's like they're getting into the metaphysical aspect of it, which I find very interesting.
It is, and when you have a pair of brains like those, and you apply it to a subject matter such as this, you really do end up with very fascinating material. So if you have the opportunity to pick up anything by either Dolan or Cameron, I would recommend doing so.
What's the most popular area within the conspiracy or paranormal field for you? When people come in, are they looking for, is it first and foremost UFO ET material, or are they looking for alternative energy, alternative health, or is it the conspiratorial?
Different strokes for different folks, so it's right across the board. On any given day, you have people coming in for looking for different subject matter. But when something happens, current events, when something happens out there in the world that really shakes things up, people usually come in looking for materials that are related to whatever the event was. So for example, when the Boston bombings took place, and there was a lot of discussion about false flags and so on and so forth, people were coming in and they were looking for materials dealing with historical examples of false flags. So whatever's happening out there really sort of drives the majority of the interest, but generally it's anything and everything.
Patrick White is here, co-founder, co-owner of Conspiracy Culture, along with his lovely bride and partner, Kadena, although she's a little mic shy, so she's sitting here next to Patrick. Patrick, again, moved locations from Queen Street, and now you're out on Bloor near the Lansdowne subway station. Give us the location again.
Sure, it's 1344 Bloor Street West, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, M6H1P2.
And you just recently, this month, opened the new location, August 22nd, was it?
Yes, August 22nd.
Okay, and people are finding you? They know where you are?
Oh, we've been busy from open to close every day since we've opened. It's been great.
Great. Okay, so do you have any more titles for us? Anything on the recent...
Yeah, Andrew Collins has released a book recently called Göbekli Tepe with the introduction by Graham Hancock. So I don't know if anybody's aware of Göbekli Tepe, site in eastern Turkey. Phenomenal. It's basically an exploration of this giant megalithic complex site in Turkey. Who built it, how it gave rise to legends regarding the foundations of civilization. It details the layout of the site, the architecture, some phenomenal carvings in the stones. It explores how it was built as a reaction to a global cataclysm, and it gets into how it was essentially the watchers from the Book of Enoch and the Anunnaki gods of Sumerian tradition who created it. Insane, ridiculous site. I think they discovered it in 94, and it was only made public in 2010.
And why such a delay? I mean, were they trying to suppress this discovery?
Just to keep it secret, because they realized it was such a significant find that people would be shutting it down at first word. The book is really well written. I mean, anything by Collins and especially Graham Hancock.
Oh, he's a heavyweight for sure.
Yeah, so that I would definitely recommend. And something along a similar vein, released by Michael Pye and Kirsten Daly, is Lost Secrets of the Gods, which is a compilation of essays and articles by individuals such as Jim Marrs, Robert Schock, Anthony West, Nick Redfern, Laird Scranton. Gets into ancient secret societies, gets into the giant lore. It makes connections between ancient Egypt and ancient China. Great book, full of great information, super reader friendly. Don't have to commit too much time to it because it's,
just short essays, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had Micah Hanks and Paul Von Ward and Jim Marrs when I sat in on Coast to Coast the last several weeks. And Jim Marrs, of course, his essay is at the end, and it ties it all together beautifully as only Jim can do. Listen, Patrick, really appreciate you coming in. Again, the new location?
1344 Bloor Street West.
conspiracyculture.com. You'll also be our official vendor at Follow the Truth, the Conspiracy Show Summit in November. Looking forward to that.
Yes, me too. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, Patrick, thank you so much. Open lines. Open lines when the Conspiracy Show continues right after this.
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
All right, we are doing open lines now until the top of the hour. All right, we're going to, is it Dan in Toronto? Dan, welcome. How are you?
Oh, fine. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I've listened to all your shows and that. I seen a spaceship when I was working at a carpet cleaning company in Hamilton in 1977 in Stony Creek, Ontario. We were in an apartment building down on the lake, and this on the 12th floor, and all the power went out, and there was a humming going on. And we looked out. There was no balconies. We looked out the window. The boss's brother and I were cleaning the carpets and that, and everything shut off. The phone wouldn't work, and that lady almost had a heart attack. The lady we were cleaning the apartment for, and this ship went by, but it wasn't a saucer. It was as long as a football field. It was so many stories, like it was like 5 stories high, and it had these slot windows, but you couldn't see through them or anything like that, and it was all aluminum color. Now, I don't know what he ever said anything about it, and I don't know what ever happened because I don't know if the media suppressed it or what.
Now, was this the same incident that you mentioned in Hamilton in 1977, or is this a separate incident?
It was in Stony Creek, which was
part of Hamilton.
It wasn't part of Hamilton. It was like a suburb outside.
Right. It's since been sort of amalgamated. It's all part
and
of
what
Hamilton.
happened was this ship come up from the Lake Ontario. I didn't see it come out of Lake Ontario, but it came from the water, and it was heading towards the escarpment, the mountain brow and everything like that.
And you said this thing was about the length of 5 football fields?
No, about the length, I'd say about a 1.5 football field.
1.5 football fields.
It was rectangular, because on the other side of the street there was like poles, hydro poles and everything. And the thing is, it didn't take out those poles. I mean, it was wide from the front of the building.
Did it make any sound?
Yeah, it was just humming.
Just humming.
Yeah, it was like if you went around hydro substation and that.
Right. And was it? I mean, how fast was it going? Was it just kind of hovering?
No, it was just gliding by.
Right. This sounds similar to. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Stephenville, Texas sighting back a few years ago that were heading in the direction of the Crawford Ranch, of course, which was the sort of the ranch. Well, it's the ranch belonging to George Walker Bush, George W. Bush.
Oh, okay.
And people reported, and when I say people, I'm talking about witnesses. Some of them were
not him or his
no, he didn't see it.
In that?
No, we don't know that he saw it. At least if he did, he's not saying anything. But we're talking about law enforcement officials,
right.
Who saw this thing, very similar to what you're describing, although I believe it was triangular. And again, we're talking about.
Well, I don't think they all come in saucers.
No. I agree, but we're talking about crafts that were hundreds of yards.
Yeah, and like I say, it was like 5 stories high, and it was all aluminum colored.
That's interesting. 5 stories high, because again, going back to Stephenville, one witness described it as a box store, like a giant box store hovering in the air. It's so large that it obliterated the sky. You looked up and you couldn't see the sky because this thing was so huge. That sounds like what you saw.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dan? Are these things extraterrestrial, or are they some sort of super sophisticated anti-gravitic device?
I don't think they're doing, like, if they're here, I don't think they're doing anything to harm, because if they were going to harm us and they were that far advanced beyond our technology, they could easily wipe us out completely.
But something that large, other people must have seen it.
Well, yes, there had to be other people. The people in the building, I don't know if they're alive anymore. There were a lot of senior citizens and stuff like that living in those residences.
Do you remember the exact date in 1977? I mean, how could you forget a day like that?
Because I hadn't gone to school yet at college. I'd say around April, May.
April, May of 1977.
Yes, I was living in the east end of Hamilton.
Well, let's throw that out there, and maybe other people saw something. Let me take you back.
I'd be
37 years.
If it would work towards discovering something, because the thing is, I know that something's out there, and I mean, I've possibly seen other stuff. I have these feelings like something's watching me because maybe I did see something.
Was there any missing time after you saw this craft? Did you take note of what time it was? Was there a time gap?
No, it's like I say, because there was no balconies, you could only see as the tail end of it went by. You could see, it was moving, but the problem was it wasn't like zoom. It was there and gone. It was just like it come. Like if you were to go down to the docks and you've seen a big ship coming through a canal or something like that,
right.
It just glided by.
Just floating by. Well, other people must have seen that.
I mean, it didn't hit nothing because no sparks went off or anything like that. And I mean, all the power went off in the building and stuff like that, and yet, like, people weren't afterwards clamoring downstairs to get outside and look at it, see what to describe it. And I mean, there was no emergency vehicle showing up or anything like that.
That is odd. All right. Listen, Dan, I appreciate the call. Fascinating account. Let me throw that out there. Let me take people back 37 years. Yeah. April, May of 1977 in Hamilton. Is there anyone else out there who saw something that night? Again, very interesting similarities between that and not only Stephenville in Texas, but there are many reports of large craft, and we're not talking again about saucer-shaped craft. We're talking about, imagine a box store, like a Walmart, cruising by, hovering by almost silently, just a few hundred feet, maybe above tree level, not making much of a sound. That's what we're talking about. All right, open lines now until the top of the hour. 416-360-0740. 416-360-0740 in the Greater Toronto Area. And out of town, toll free, 1-866-740-4740. Perhaps you want to weigh in on this Ebola scare. There was a recent a study related to the Ebola virus, which states that the virus is rapidly mutating, making it difficult to diagnose and treat. This was a study conducted on the initial patients who were infected with the virus in Sierra Leone, which revealed more than 400 genetic modifications of the Ebola virus, which might prove detrimental for the ongoing treatment measures, but also to the vaccines that are supposedly under clinical trials for future treatment of the Ebola virus. And, of course, we learned recently that the Center for Disease Control has a patent on one strain of the Ebola virus, which is a real head-scratcher. Researchers at the Broad Institute in Massachusetts and Harvard University warn that the Ebola virus is constantly undergoing mutation. The findings show that the future treatment options, including vaccines as well as diagnosing of the disease, will be very difficult and less effective as mutations continue. As of now, the researchers have analyzed around 99 Ebola viral genomes. Since the Ebola outbreak in West Africa in March, more than 1,550 people have died. Earlier in August, a new viral strain of the Ebola virus, different from the one being observed in West Africa, was detected from the Democratic Republic of Congo, posing a threat to millions of lives all over the world. We're also hearing that Ebola is now spreading into major West African cities. And it's being reported that West Africa Ebola cases are up 550 in a week. Now get this, 5 co-authors of the latest Ebola study have died from Ebola. All right, let's say hello to Ron, checking in from the Six Nations Reserve. Hello, Ron. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show. Good morning.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to relay a few stories that I have, starting in 2012. In 2012, I think I have seen maybe from then to now, maybe 40 unidentified flying objects, and some things that I could identify.
Now, are you out Hagersville way, Oswego, Cayuga? Whereabouts are you?
When I cited the things that I did see, I was closer to Hagersville at the time.
Okay. Now, since 2012, you have you've seen 40 unidentified flying objects.
Well, I've seen a lot of them that try to look like stars, but they're not stars. And at one point in 2012, I had a laser pointer, and I pointed at one of these stars, and I started going SOS to it. And then I went 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, just to know that, I could count. And I just sort of flushed it off, but I went in the house afterwards. The following night, I had an occasion to go outside because my bathroom was outside. And right over top of my house, rather than maybe 20 to 30 feet, I had 3 flying objects over my house that were shaped like old-fashioned irons, and they were about the size of a stretched limousine, and they were doing a triangular configuration, all 3 points, and one would leave one point and go to the other one, and they would all shift at the same time. But what I noticed on them, because my light on the house illuminated them a little bit, they had a flat side, which on the back end of them, it seemed like the back of them, they had a green and blue light. In the center, there was a large white light, and in the front, there was a red light.
Anyone else? Did anyone else see these crafts?
That was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was home alone, so I really didn't get to see any. Nobody else could see them. I tried to report it, but I was just ho-hum because I didn't have a photograph.
Now, recently, this is interesting because just recently I get word from a reporter at the Brantford Expositor. Brantford's my hometown, and Susan Gamble, who just wrote a piece on me, a very nice piece in the Expositor earlier in the week, that a brand new MUFON group has opened up in Brantford. So finally, people down that way in southwestern Ontario have a new UFO watch group that they can report these sightings to. So you might want to check out that group and get in touch with them. Now, what is the most recent sighting you've had, Ron, on the Six Nations Reserve?
My most recent sighting was 2013. It was April. And where my house was located is up on a bank overlooking a creek of a little valley. And that morning, I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was going to go use the bathroom. I went outside, and there where the trees they didn't have any leaves on it yet. And over the trees, I seen this flying saucer, a bona fide flying saucer coming toward me, and it stopped over top the creek, which is Boston Creek, and it lowered itself down so that it went about 100 feet over top the creek, and then it started coming up the creek very, very slowly and illuminating the creek and its bank as it went up. It heightened itself to go over top the bridge area to the road below me, and it went around the corner and it was gone. I didn't have anything to photograph it with, but it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It moved effortlessly and silent. It had a reddish-orange light that went around the outside of it, the very rim of it, and it seemed like there was different blocks of letters in each one of those little pigments that went around. It was going around in a clockwise motion.
Listen, Ron, I really appreciate you checking in with us tonight, and thank you for these detailed accounts. If you see any more, please don't hesitate to give us a call.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a wonderful thing being able to talk about it to anyone that would understand.
I appreciate it. And Six Nations is if you ever get a chance, it's a beautiful part of the province, out Hagersville Way, Oswego, Cayuga, especially in the fall. You want to take a nice drive? That's the place. All right.
Very nice if you come out.
Okay, Ron. Thank you so much. Open lines here on The Conspiracy Show, 416-360-0740.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
And welcome back. Open lines. A rare opportunity. Just you, me, and the telephone here on The Conspiracy Show. Let me give you the numbers one more time. 416-360-0740. That's in the Greater Toronto area. 416-360-0740. And toll free from just about anywhere. 1-866-740-4740. When he was for a while, he was kind of a perennial, every 4 years he would run for president. And I always liked Ron Paul, former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul. Just a simple country doctor with what I thought was some pretty simple homespun wisdom and common sense. But I was always curious as to why he was so silent about 9/11. There were a number of times that he was asked, and he just kind of brushed it off. And part of me understands why. When you're running for president, talking about 9/11 potentially being an inside job is sort of the equivalent of kissing the third rail in politics. But now that he's sort of retired from politics and left his son, Rand Paul, to sort of pick up the mantle, although I must say Rand is no Ron Paul, he's now talking about 9/11. And he is now suggesting that the U.S. government knew about the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks before the incident occurred inside the country. He said, "I believe that if we ever get the full truth about 9/11, we'll find out that our government had it in the records exactly what the planes were, or at least close to it." This was Paul speaking on a radio interview with Money and Markets host Charles Goyette last Friday. He continued, "You already mentioned that the U.S. government had been warned that something was going to happen," he added. "Does that prove the fact that our president and others actually sat down and laid the plans and did this? I don't think it does," he said. The former presidential candidate also noted that the crimes committed by former al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden were minor compared to the harm the United States has caused since the 2001 attacks. "Our own government did more harm to the liberties of the American people than bin Laden did," Paul said. All right, let's go back to the phones, and I believe it's Tony checking in from New York State. Tony, welcome. How are you?
Hey, Richard. I'm good. I just have a quick story to relate of an experience that I went through over about 15 years ago. I was driving delivery on a countywide route.
What part of the state are you?
Upstate New York, near Buffalo, between Rochester and Buffalo area.
So Erie County, Niagara County?
Monroe area.
Monroe. Okay, I know it. Yep.
Okay, this experience occurred about 15 years ago. I was a driver delivering. I stopped at a Senior Towers and just coincidentally enough was making a delivery. I stopped. There was some elderly people exiting their vehicles, going into the Senior Tower, and as they were walking, the older women were talking about the experience they just came from. They were relating to themselves as they were walking. I just happened to be there at the right time, and I overheard it. They claimed that they were at this outdoor, like not an auction, but like a flea market thing, and there was a table, and there was some things on the table, and they said they looked up in the sky, they saw these two clouds meeting, they saw this dowel just come off the table and go up in the air and ascend up into where the clouds were meeting. And that wasn't the only strange thing. They also related that this strange stuff fell from the sky. I think in ufology that would be considered like angel hair.
Okay, right.
If you've heard of that.
Yes, yes.
And I was just amazed by this. And I stood there in just kind of amazement. Now, I didn't go to the scene where they were describing it. Just happened. They were just coming from it. I had to go on a route, so I had to leave there quickly, do a delivery. Years later, I would read the accounts in, say, Bud Hopkins' testimonial books there,
right,
of his patients or clients describing, UFO abduction scenarios where women were impregnated, and they would the fetuses would be removed, and then they would try nurturing these fetuses. The woman would be returned to the craft or the ship, and they would see the fetuses, and they would meet with the developing, children to give them emotional support, and then they would use dowels because these creatures, I believe they're Nephilim, couldn't relate emotionally because they lacked the human emotional capacities, and the dowels were brought in as like a tool.
Right, right.
So that's what I got, Richard. I just wanted to share that. I know it's kind of a unique testimony, and probably you won't hear too many like that.
No, I've not heard that before, anything resembling that before, Tony, and I really appreciate you checking in from New York.
Richard, the other thing is you mentioned MUFON, a pretty good organization. We knew some people. We did lose a negative to them. One of the triangular craft pictures we had from another area in the Catskills. Just a thought.
I appreciate it. Interesting. Okay. Appreciate it, Tony.
Richard.
All right. Do we have time, Tim, for another call, or are we heading into a break here? Okay. Let's head on into a break. When we come back, I think we've got Fred in Philadelphia. If you've got a line, hold on to it. If not, 416-360-0740. Toll free, 1-866-740-4740. This is The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett. Open lines now until we dim the lights.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Welcome back. An evening of open lines now until the top of the hour. Interesting story on NBC News. Photos of Yeti footprints hit the auction block. Ardent believers in the existence of a mythical creature known as the Yeti may be excited to learn that rare photographic evidence, in quotes, of this mysterious beast is now up for auction. In 1951, British mountaineer Eric Earl Shipton was leading an expedition on Mount Everest when he took a series of photographs of what he believed might be the footprints of a bipedal, ape-like creature known as the Yeti. The photos sparked a debate in Europe about the existence of the mythical creature, according to Christie's. Now, I just wanted to mention that story because I just received, speaking of Britain, I just received an email from someone going by the name of Night Fury, who listens to the show, the Conspiracy Show, via the podcast. He says, I was listening to a podcast of your recent show on Bigfoot, and I wanted to tell you my story. I'm from the UK, and I was working at a summer camp from June to August 2009, but this was in Massachusetts, from 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. I was with the children, and after that was my own free time. Once or twice a week, the kitchen staff would set up a gathering in the nearby forest. It was basically an excuse to party and have a few beers. My friend and I were running late one night, and the other lads went ahead with us while we got ready. At around 10:30 p.m., we decided to leave for the party. We made our way around the stable in silence as to not rouse the horses and alert the camp security bosses, with only starlight and our small torches to guide us. We walked through a clearly trodden path of tall grass left by others attending the party and had some good banter on the way. Either side the grass was about 4 to 5 feet high. Just a guess, as I'm 5'9". As we made our way through, the wind suddenly stopped, and so did our conversation, as there was an eerie mood in the air. Around 5 to 6 feet in front of us, some sort of giant creature moved from one side of the tall grass to the other. It briefly looked at us both with huge glowing eyes, reflecting the light of our torches. He's a Brit, so I'm gathering he means flashlights. And continued on its way. My friend and I were frozen with fear, and as soon as the creature left, we ran as fast as we could to the party. As soon as we arrived, people were making jokes about how scared we looked, but we didn't dare tell them what we saw for fear of ridicule. Eventually, we let slip to a couple of the guys about what we saw, but in a jokey fashion, so they wouldn't take the mickey. I cannot explain to this day what I saw, and although I didn't detect malevolence from this creature, I still get chills thinking about this incident. In hindsight, I'm convinced this creature was Bigfoot, or some sort of hominid. My friend is 6'6", and this creature towered above him, so I'd estimate its size to be about 7 to 8 feet tall. The other strange thing was the total silence in the forest. Even when the creature pulled the grass trees back, there was no sound at all, no rustling, no birds, no branch breaking underfoot, absolutely no sound. After hearing your show, I just wanted to tell my story and get it off my chest without ridicule. Many thanks. Keep up the good work. Kind regards. Brins, he signs off. Appreciate the email. And he was referring to a recent story we did, our show on Bigfoot, but sightings here in Ontario, primarily Algonquin Park, not too far, a couple hours from here. Hundreds of sightings up in Algonquin Park. All right, to the city of brotherly love we go. Is it Fred in Philadelphia? Fred, welcome to the Conspiracy Show. Good morning.
Thank you. I know this is not a sensationalist topic, but I think it's very important. I have had a lot of experience with reviewing patents at a federal depository library, and basically, I just want to say this is happening all over the world, where all the sources of information are being chopped up into non-linkable databases.
How do you mean? I'm not sure I follow, Fred. What do you mean they're being chopped up?
Well, you're not going to have the ability to educate yourself independently, politically, by using free resources, or even going to college will be difficult. It'll be difficult to do this.
You're saying that patents that are readily available, let's say online, where you can read about them, that information is being systematically destroyed?
I'm saying that the way to use information, your evaluation of it is going to be hindered. There's always information available, Richard, but whether we realize it or not, we always categorize it. We always put a importance to every piece of information, and we always evaluate it. And that's going to be impossible because the system is changing, deliberately changing, so that the First Amendment is not operating. It's going to be an Orwellian type of a information system.
So we would be denied access to knowledge, essentially, is what you're saying.
To meaningful knowledge.
Meaningful knowledge, right. This is as a system of control, presumably.
Yeah. Basically, up until this point, you've always had the author, even if it wasn't perfect, you had the author communicating with the reader. Now, I believe the government has found a way to twist that pipeline, to restrict it, and in a way that you don't realize.
All right, Fred. Admittedly, I don't necessarily understand this entirely, but it's interesting nonetheless. And if you have any other information that you could gather together for us at some point and check in with us once again, I'd appreciate it. Fred is in Philadelphia. Thanks for that. Open lines for another 10 minutes or so. 416-360-0740. 416-360-0740. That's in the Greater Toronto Area, and of course toll-free from out of town for all our affiliates. South of the 49th, 1-866-740-4740. I've done a number of programs on the dangers of EMF, an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, which could be caused by the detonation of a small nuclear device at a fairly low altitude. But it could also happen as a result of a coronal mass ejection, and this is of great concern because all of our electrical grids in the United States and Canada, you know how interdependent they are and connected. They're not shielded properly. At least we know they're not in the United States. Not sure exactly what the status is here in Canada, but there is great concern among some of the people that I've had on this show, Michael Maloof and others, that an EMP event, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, whether, again, it's a coronal mass ejection or some sort of terrorist or rogue state attack. And we would all be left, freezing in the dark. Now, interesting story I see here. Where is this? This is trying to see the source of this so I can give I don't have it here. But the article is called Electromagnetic Warfare is Here. A briefcase-sized radio weapon could wreak havoc in our networked world. It's by William A. Radasky. And he says, in the 2001 action movie Ocean's 11, criminals use an electromagnetic weapon to black out a portion of Las Vegas. I remember that movie. Very futuristic, you may say, but the threat is real and growing. The problem is growing because the technology available to attackers has improved even as the technology being attacked has become more vulnerable. Our infrastructure increasingly depends on closely integrated high-speed electronic systems operating at low internal voltages. That means they can be laid low by short, sharp pulses, high in voltage but low in energy. Output that can now be generated by a machine the size of a suitcase, batteries included. Electromagnetic attacks are not only possible, they're already happening. One may be underway as you read this. Even so, you'd probably never hear of it. These stories are typically hushed up for the sake of security or the victim's reputation. Occasionally, though, an incident comes to light. In May of 2012, for instance, the Korea Herald reported that over 500 aircraft flying in and out of South Korea's Incheon and Gimpo airports reported GPS failures, as did hundreds of ships and fishing boats in the sea west of Incheon Airport. The source of the EM fields was traced to the North Korean city of Kaesong, about 50 kilometers north of Incheon. South Korean officials indicated that North Korea had imported truck-based jamming systems in 2010 that had the capability to jam GPS signals. These officials speculated that one purpose of the jamming was to interfere with South Korea's highly digital society. or perhaps the North Koreans were conducting an experiment using South Korea as their beta tester. In the decades past, the few electronic systems that existed worked at higher voltages than today's machines and at lower frequencies, making them less sensitive to EM disruption. Today, though, any digitally controlled infrastructure presents a target. I'm going to post this story on the website, richardsyrett.com, and I'll also tweet it if you want to check it out. I think it's worth a read. Electromagnetic warfare is here. All right, let's say hello to Mark, who is in Toronto this morning. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show, Mark.
Good evening, Mr. Syrett. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise, sir.
I take it you know Toronto fairly well.
Reasonably. I've called Toronto home for the better part of 30 years.
Okay. This goes back to around 2000. Now, I did write this at the time I wrote this sighting up in detail. Are you still there?
Yes, listening.
Oh, okay, sorry. I have my radio off here. So,
thank you.
I wrote this up, and my brother in Vancouver was in MUFON at the time.
Right.
And I sent it to him with detailed diagrams and the formulas I used to calculate the altitude, etc. But I never heard anything back from him or MUFON about it. I was expecting to get maybe a sighting report. But what happened was, it was probably early November or middle November, and it was one of those summers where the summer had gone on quite long. We had a lovely summer. And you know that when the summer ends in the Toronto area, we get that northwest wind coming down from Manitoba, coming down the trough, as we say, and you know, you can tell the summer's gone. That's
right,
it.
Exactly, yeah.
It was blustery. There was a high wind, and there were some high clouds, and you could lots of high clouds. It was fairly overcast, and you could see them being blown across the city, you know, right across from west to east.
I got about 2 minutes here.
Okay, I was at Bloor and Lansdowne, where I used to live, and I still maintained a little garage workshop there after I moved up from the area. I looked up in the sky, and there were searchlights coming from the CNE area, and as you probably have seen lots of times, and they were sweeping around the sky.
Right.
And at one point, almost overhead, whenever the searchlights passed overhead at this one point, you could see this object illuminated in them. What it was, if you hold a small, let's say a pea at arm's length, it looked like a ball of dense cloud, about pea size at arm's length, surrounded by a ball of slightly less dense cloud, about the size of a quarter, held at arm's length. Now, because I could see the angle the searchlights were making as they swung around, and I knew the distance down to the CNE grounds where they were from Bloor and Lansdowne, I used trigonometry, basic high school math, to calculate the altitude.
Good for you.
Oh, yeah, it was about 15,000 feet was the answer I got. You take something the size of a pea or a quarter held at arm's length, and that makes it like at least the size of a strip mall.
There you go. Yep, these floating box stores we're hearing about.
Watched it for at least an hour. I was looking at other people to see if anyone noticed it. No one was looking up. You know, people just running. It was a cold, windy night, and people were going about their business hurriedly. But I stood at least an hour. I changed my location a couple of times and kept looking at it. It did not move. It wasn't blowing around in the wind. The clouds were racing by across the city in this, you know, the late November, you know, blast we were getting. And this thing did not move. I just wonder. I've heard about things shrouded in cloud, and I was wondering if anyone else had ever seen this or knew what it was. Is this an atmospheric phenomenon?
Give us the date again, Mark. Give us the date, roughly.
I had it on the report. I'd have to check my files. It's years ago now. It's like 14 years ago, but it was around 2000.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll throw that out there, and I'll invite people to maybe send me an email. You can email me through the website, richardsyrett.com. Just go to the contact page, and if you saw anything, roughly 15,000 feet, visible certainly around the CNE, caught up in the searchlights, and
yeah.
CNE, of course, going on right now, just a stone's throw from here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was at Bloor and Lansdowne.
Right.
But and it was almost overhead where I was.
Okay. So 2000, what time? Late August, right?
No, late November.
Late November. I'm sorry.
Middle to late November.
Middle to late November. Oh, got it. Okay. All right. Well, let's throw that out there and see what happens. I appreciate your call, Mark.
Oh, thank you very much for taking my call, Mr. Sarah. It was a pleasure.
Not at all. Listen, if you ever contact MUFON and you're not getting the response you want, there's always, I know it's an American organization, but Peter Davenport is the director at the National UFO Reporting Center, and he may, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing he might take some Canadian calls as well, and that's nuforc.org, NUFORC, nuforc.org. All right, that's it for us. Listen, next week, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, back on the program, the author of The Harbinger, talks about signs of an impending economic crash which seem to fit in with some sort of biblical cycle. It's called the Shemitah. Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, back next week on the program, along with Joshua P. Warren, paranormal investigator, the author of a brand new book. It's a good one. It Was a Dark and Creepy Night. Thanks, Tim Spreen. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. My name is Richard Syrett, your humble host. Oftentimes on this program we think in terms of the big picture. We talk about the New World Order and the Illuminati and geopolitics and political subterfuge and things that are happening over there. And it's easy, very easy, to lose sight of things that are happening in our very own backyard, things that are troublesome, disturbing, odious even. On the surface, they may not seem important, but they are. And this is how and why we are losing the battle for our inalienable rights and freedoms. Here's a perfect example. Not sure if you're familiar with what's going on here in Ontario. The provincial government here, the Liberal government of Kathleen Wynne, they are eyeing serious changes to traffic court. They're calling it an Online Administrative Monetary Penalty System, or AMPS, AMPS. And the idea is that this Online Administrative Monetary Penalty System, it sounds rather innocuous, but I don't think it is. The idea is that it would replace the current procedures for paying and disputing charges under the Provincial Offences Act. So currently, if you want to plead not guilty to, let's say, a speeding violation, you want to plead not guilty, you get to go to court and present evidence. And this is fundamental. You get to face your accuser. And he has to present evidence, or she has to present evidence, and that would be the police officer, presumably, who issued the ticket. Again, this is a fundamental tenet of democracy and the judicial process. It's one of the linchpins. But now here in Ontario, the Liberals are saying this is a cost-saving measure. You'll resolve your dispute online, and some unbiased bureaucrat will essentially determine how much you have to pay. No presumption of innocence, no day in court, no facing your accuser. They want to streamline the process. So you're all guilty. We'll decide how much you get to pay, which will mean more convictions, more revenue into the municipal coffers, and everyone is sitting back saying, well, that's okay. But again, the loss of a fundamental freedom. Now they're floating this idea. I can't imagine this will withstand a charter challenge before the Supreme Court. We shall see. However, the mere audacity to even float this idea. And again, people may say, well, if it saves money, why not? This is odious. This is what I mean by odious. This is what I mean by the incremental erosion of our fundamental rights and freedoms. I'm telling you, this is only the beginning. And this is the problem with collectivists. And the Liberals are collectivists. This is ultimately where their philosophy leads. But they're also very clever. Pay no attention to this. Look over here. Now we're putting beer in grocery stores. This is how it all ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Pecked to death by 1,000 sparrows. Left-leaning, collectivist, odious sparrows. Get up on the website, richardsyrett.com, where Albert, the intern, has posted some fascinating articles. You can log on now while you're listening to the show or the podcast and read during the commercial breaks. Or you can hit pause on the podcast, read an article, and then listen to more of the show. Isn't technology grand? There's an article that goes back a couple of years from WND that offers some spiritual context to the careers of the Beatles back in the mid-'60s. At the height of their fame, all four of the Beatles professed to be atheists, but later in life, all four ended up seeking a spiritual life. John Lennon, who of course turned the world upside down when he proclaimed the Beatles are more popular than Jesus, later admitted that he was a most religious fellow. He said he was brought up a Christian, and he only now understood some of the things that Christ was saying in those parables. You can find that article again in the slide carousel atop richardsyrett.com. Another great article on the occult meanings of many American logos and symbols. So those are just two, a mere sampling. Again, the slide carousel atop of richardsyrett.com. Once again, we're doing an HOA, Hangout on Air. If you want to catch the live stream, just go to my Twitter feed at Richard Syrett. Let me spell the last name. S, as in Simon. Y, because I love you. R, E-T-T-S-Y-R-E-T-T, at Richard Syrett. While you're there, please follow and say hi. Just click on the tweet that says HOA. It's near the top of the Twitter feed, and you are in. You can also go back and watch previous streams on our YouTube channel, which is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett. We have another great show in store for you tonight. I met my guest this evening about, 6 months ago, while I was preparing to host Coast to Coast. He was introduced to me by Coast's exec producer, Lisa Lyon, who called me up and said, "You've got to meet this gentleman up in Oregon." He was recruited by naval intelligence at a very young age. This guy's a genuine prodigy, a wonderkind, you might say, in the field of advanced physics. He's also heavily involved in alternative agriculture. He's an herbalist, a real Renaissance man, if ever there was one. So Lisa Lyon said, talk to him, and if you'd like, you can interview him on Coast. So we had this lengthy conversation via Skype one afternoon, and we went on to do a show on Coast. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about secret military research, New Age physics, powers of the mind. He spoke about his early days being part of a Black Ops team for Navy intelligence, later working for Boeing. The aircraft company was involved with researching magnetic monopoles and anti-gravity approaches, and the ability to change space and time with repulsion coils, just nanometers in size. He went on to say that there are conspiracies, cover-ups, and false flags layered like an onion, and every time you peel one back, there's another one. He detailed some of the secret things he saw in Antarctica, a set of caverns, one of which was a mile high and had clouds in it that rained, I kid you not, a Nazi submarine base in disarray, and a Viking base from the 14th century. The whole of Earth is honeycombed with interconnecting tunnels and networks, some as far as 100 miles below, which could be populated by people who haven't been on the surface since the Great Flood. He went on to mention, during this conversation, there were times, quite frankly, I asked myself, are people getting this? Does it make sense? But the phone lines, I have to tell you, they melted down. People couldn't get enough, and the response after the show was phenomenal. Turns out people know exactly what Dr. Richard Allen Miller is on about, even if at times your humble host was holding on for dear life trying to play catch-up. So I thought it was high time I introduced listeners of The Conspiracy Show to Dr. Richard Allen Miller. He's a pioneer in the annals of metaphysical and paranormal exploration. Again, he began working in the secret world of Navy intel in the late 60s and now has amazing experiences and conclusions to share. He's getting ready for a prepper conference. We'll find out more about that as well, and we'll talk about some of the numerous titles, books, power tools for the 21st century. and much more. Great pleasure to welcome to The Conspiracy Show Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Hello, Richard. How are you? Are you there, Richard? I don't think Richard is, no. Oh, he dropped off the line there. That's all right. We'll get him back. While we are waiting, let me just quickly, and Tim is working furiously in the other room trying to get Dr. Miller back on. Let me mention quickly that I have touched upon this briefly. We are developing an app for The Conspiracy Show. It will be available for Android and iPhone. And we are probably just a couple of weeks away from a hard launch. I can't wait to do the unveil on this. And once we have it ready to roll, we will bring, I'm going to try and convince Sharon Forster, who's developing the app, to come on and sort of walk us through this amazing piece of technology. But it'll be great. You can take The Conspiracy Show wherever you go, on your Android, your iPhone, your iPad. And I can honestly say I've seen nothing like it. I've sampled a number of different apps for radio programs and so forth. So get ready for that, the big unveil. Now, I understand we have Dr. Miller back, but we've lost the visual. That's okay. We've got his wonderful discarnate voice.
I can't hear you, though. I need higher volume.
All right. Dr. Miller, can you hear me now?
Need just a little more volume, please.
All right, Tim, crank it. Give us all you got in the other room.
This is crazy.
There we go. Okay.
That's better. How my voice?
You're coming in loud and clear, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good to have you on board.
Everything that Richard was saying, but it was coming through my computer. I didn't know how to turn that part off.
Well, we're glad to have you on board. Now,
I'm sorry that we can't do the other part. It's I love watching Richard and his facials.
That's all right. We've got lots of slides to share with people that are joining the hangout.
Let's get on with it. I'm sorry about the inconvenience.
Not to worry. Let's talk about this big prepper conference. Taking people off the grid, teaching them how to live off the grid for 30 days. Just give us some details before we drill down on that.
Well, basically, the grid's going to collapse. You can count on it. And when it does, we're going to have more meltdowns with Fukushimas and all kinds of other natural forms of disaster. The ocean is rising in sea level because it's 64 degrees in Antarctica today. And so we have a bunch of different events that are about to happen that are going to require some degree of sovereignty. And tonight's talk, I thought I would run through some basics on how to survive, almost any kind of a grid collapse. So the title of this talk would be more like an interview, would be like, can you live off the grid for 30 days? That's probably going to happen shortly.
And what is going to be the instigator here? Are we talking about an EMP event, or are we talking about...
That's the most likely. That's the most likely thing will be a CMA.
A coronal mass ejection.
Off the sun.
Okay.
So there's global warming going on because of the heliosphere of the sun itself is heating up right now. It is shooting off X-band. Thank gosh it's off in the wrong direction, or we would have been back in the Stone Age earlier. Basically, when the grid collapses, you'll be out of things like water and transportation, food, communication, medicine. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Well,
and if you're not prepared, or at least have some idea of what to do, it could be really bad.
Well, when the grid goes down, and because it hasn't been sufficiently hardened against such an event, we could be in the dark for decades. So, I mean, can you prepare people, can we prepare ourselves to be living off the grid, not just for 30 days, Dr. Miller, but let's face it, indefinitely?
Well, that's my whole thing I did on sustainable lifeboats. The idea that the USS America is taking on water. And I don't know whether it's going to sink or swim, but I think it's time to start thinking about sustainable lifeboats. A lifeboat without oars is not a very cool thing. That means you have to be prepared for all kinds of possibilities.
Now, which side of there are sort of two camps to my mind when we talk about preparing for such an eventuality. And there's the camp that subscribes to heading for the hills, get away from people, and then there are those who subscribe to build communities, maybe even stay put, because you're going to need to be associated with doctors and plumbers and handy people. Which camp are you in?
Yes, all of the above. What you're talking about is bugging in or bugging out. And often you can't choose who you're in the bunker with. And so that's kind of creepy sometimes.
Indeed. Listen, let's hold on, Dr. Miller. We'll take a timeout, come back, and we'll talk about, we'll start with 30 days. Baby steps. Living off the grid. Dr. Richard Alan Miller, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
The truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
And joining us on the line from the Pacific Northwest, Dr. Richard Alan Miller, the author of a number of books, including Power Tools for the 21st Century, the Encyclopedia of Alternative Agriculture, The Modern Alchemist, The Magical and Ritual Use of Herbs, Natural Plants of Commercial Importance, and the list goes on. We're talking about preparing for some sort of cataclysmic event. All right, now. Let's do baby steps. Let's say we want to get off the grid and survive off the grid for 30 days. How do we begin?
I think that water is going to be the first immediate problem for everyone. I think that once the grid is down, of course, all the municipalities will fail. They won't be able to deliver water. And so what are you going to do? You have 3 days without water. And that's where FEMA has become so popular. That's its primary function, is if a grid were to go down, to be able to supply the populace with water. Now, it's important to understand, I would recommend that everyone have at least 3 days of water for every single person in their family on hand at any given moment, with a backup plan the first day on how to replace it. Now, I'm going to give you some water facts here. A person can only live 3 days without water. The optimum amount of drinking water, there's a basic formula that would say you take your body weight in pounds and have that into ounces. That means a 200-pound man needs approximately 100 ounces a day in order to survive.
All right.
Most of our water is polluted, and so how do you clean it? You need to have a plan on how to do that. Simple, down and dirty, you could take a pair of jeans and stuff it with sand. That filters the water, and then you need to boil it 10 minutes for every 1,000 feet.
So
for
fill
3,000 feet, you need to boil it for 30 minutes.
So fill up a pair of jeans. Let me see if I can draw a mental image here for people. You take a pair of jeans, you sew the bottom together so that you can fill it up with sand, and then you're going to. No, I'm sorry, you're not going to. How are you going to keep the sand in there? You need to pour the water through.
That's right, just like you would a Berkey. You're running it through sand. Most people do not understand yet how to take activated charcoal, which would be best. You can take activated charcoal from a fireplace and filter your water for grime and things like that out of it. Right. However, certain areas of the United States where I live, for example, in Grants Pass, we have serpentine soils, and as a result, some of the water has arsenic in it. And so you have to have small testing kits. You can't just assume it's clean. Even with filtering, you can get toxic.
How about purifying the water with sunlight?
Sunlight is a purifier in structuring the water, but it's not going to clean it of other things besides water in it. Well, sunlight will restructure water, but it won't clean it. There are gizmos that you can buy on the internet that would suggest differently. And it is true that we now have a filter that will take seawater and make it potable or drinkable. But sunlight itself won't work.
I see a lot of preppers online talking about shielding your electronics, and to me that's futile. What is the point of putting your cell phone and your computer inside sealing it inside a tin garbage can when no one else there's nobody to talk to on the other end?
Well, that's a good point. What we're talking about with CMEs is microwave band, and to shield microwave using Faraday cages and like that is near impossible because microwave band has wavelengths near quantum mechanical levels, which you can't have a material. It'd be like a garbage can. And actually, the microwave could wiggle its way on into the can just because of the spaces between the lid and the can itself. Microwave is almost impossible with current technologies to shield. So anything that comes off the sun that's going to be in an X-band or upper, it's going to fry everything. And when I say fry everything, your computer chips in a car, the grid itself with capacitors and, load cells, whatever, you're going to have a problem because the microwave is invasive, and if it's a high enough energy level, it'll just fry everything. In fact, just for the record, we had such a CME, actually it wasn't a CME, it was a plasma filament that went off 2 months ago in the opposite direction of the Earth and would have taken the Earth down into the Stone Age. We had a similar X-band CME off yesterday. SuspiciousObservers.com did a very nice presentation on that. We were lucky.
Is this do you suspect, Dr. Miller, and I guess we're speculating here, but do you suspect that might be what is behind this Homeland Security maneuvers, Jade Helm 15? No?
Trust me when I tell you, this is the least of your problems. That's the first of a number of shoes that are about to fall. After the grid collapses, and you don't have any way to turn off 400 different Chernobyls, then there will probably be a mini ice age identical to the movie The Day After Tomorrow. And that would require, where you live up in Toronto. Where are you?
We're in Toronto, yes.
Yeah, you're in Toronto. You're going to have to be at least 12 feet underground. The frost lines are going to start at 12 feet. It'll be just exactly like The Day After Tomorrow. What's happening is Greenland's glaciers are melting. The sea is rising, just like in the movie, and it's changing the ocean currents and the desalinization of the sea. And what's going to happen next is a mini ice age while the basic ocean currents reboot. It'll last about 2.5 weeks. When you crawl out of the cave like the Clovis culture did, now what's going to happen after that is that you're going to find that you've got a snowpack for 3 years. Now,
and how high will that be?
You have to go into your bug-in with the more soil organisms in your seed because there's nothing going to be a living when you come out of it. And that probably will go down to as deep as Texas, just like in the movie, and why a lot of the smart money now is bugging out to Costa Rica. Costa Rica has its own problems with volcanoes going off right now.
Right, indeed.
And so all of this is what we call a semi-extinction event. It's happening right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't say something about it. Why is the sun heating up? That's a big question. There's global warming on Mars and Pluto. So it is happening as a natural event, and there's nothing even the 1%ers can do trying to go down deep. Now, there'll be geographical changes, and it will be like going from Atlantis to Greece. A complete rebirth of culture. Nothing. The Clovis culture has pictures of it. We knew about these 200 years ago, showing the sun burping and then crawling out of the cave to start the Incas, or whatever they call them. Now, I'm telling you, this is the second of a number of shoes that are about to fall down on the ground. And so there isn't really much any of us can do about it except understand that it is an opportunity to evolve spiritually.
So let's assume then that...
am I coming on too hard?
No, listen,
I mean, I don't
forewarned, forearmed.
People, but there isn't, and so, Jade Helm, some of the other things that are going on are distractions.
But is that what they are preparing? I mean, there are rumors, for example, that certain government agencies, the Fed in Chicago, I believe, is bugged out. That's a rumor.
Yeah, and the Springfield, where I was in Springfield, that whole underground bunker is now active, and major active. All the different underground bunkers at the different airports are now in active service. Yes.
The chemtrail spraying that we're seeing, this geoengineering program that's going on surreptitiously, is that a last-ditch effort to forestall something that cannot be reversed because this...
That is correct. That buys them some time to do something else. We have, there's going to be a problem even on Mars. And the problem is what's heating up the sun is planet 7X. It does exist. It is coming off elliptic out near Neptune. You can calculate it exactly precision. It is most likely a dead dwarf binary, and it's heavy. And because of that, it's changing the orbits, and it's heating up, causing the sun to heat up. Now, that isn't most likely going to hit us, but
it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to.
Third foot falling.
And it's dragging a kind of a mini solar system along with it, is it not?
Kind of. Well, that is speculation on that. I don't know for a fact.
Right.
I can tell you that the calculations I've seen suggest that it's a single binary that was 5.5 times the size of the Earth and much denser, probably something out of solid nickel or something.
So, if we have to bug out, how do you time something like that? How do you know when it's time to bug out and move to Costa Rica? And
that's the $64,000 question. Nobody really knows except higher pay grades than me. So, I'm going to guess we're going to see the first ugly foot happen in September this year. I think the grid is going to collapse this year because of the way the sun has been acting recently, and that then Nibiru, or whatever they want to call it, will probably show up around 2017.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know where this is all going to go. What I'm doing is preparing meagerly for the lighter forms of grid collapse. I can't afford to go underground to protect myself from a mini ice age.
Few of us could.
Well, there you go. That's the deal.
I understand, so, Dr. Miller.
What can we do to defend ourselves if we wanted to, quote, survive?
I understand that you have in your possession a 3D printer which you're using to desktop manufacturing of a geometric dome. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's we have a 3D portable 3D printer now that is putting up 30-foot geodesic domes underground to prepare for the ice age, made of cement. Takes 24 hours. We can print one in 24 hours.
Is that right? A geodesic dome in 24 hours.
And then it goes back and reprints on top of that a magnesium oxide radiation shield for Fukushima. Now, here is the bad news. The bad news is that there are 400 Fukushimas whose switches are still on. And if we have a grid collapse, you don't have the opportunity to turn those off correctly. And if you don't turn those off correctly, and we have a mini ice age, that will cool everything to a point where you don't have a radiation problem until it thaws and your ancestors, not ancestors, but your future, crawls out of caves to restart civilization again. This has recurred 3,600 years through time. There are a bunch of books out on it that are, I find, credible. Nobody knows for a fact, and I'm sure there are some, but my pay grade doesn't, let me know for a fact, and so it's difficult to plan. What I'm doing now is building sustainable lifeboats for the military, and we have aquaculture systems that feed certain bunkers that are very efficient, but an ice age is one thing different than a grid collapse. And if the grid collapses, that's survivable. And mini ice age, there's going to be an extinction process. And there will be survivors. There always will be survivors. It's just you'll come out of the cave without electricity, and as everything starts to thaw, what happens next is all the reactors go critical, and there's no way that any life can live on Earth.
All right, get the underground. We'll find out how we can live underground. Can we survive underground? Dr. Richard Allen Miller joining us from the Beaver State, Oregon, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us, and the prognosis, quite frankly, is bleak, beyond bleak. But you're saying that it is possible to survive, perhaps underground. And can you grow plants underground?
Hydroponics, aquaculture. I have this one unit out on East Evans Creek. It's 258 feet long and has a throughput of 50,000 heads of lettuce every day, 24/7. It's a closed system using fish, so they're growing protein as well.
And how many heads of lettuce are you producing?
50,000 per day.
Wow. We're talking little tiny seedlings.
No? You start with a little slip of a plant, and within 7 days, you have a full, mature lettuce for harvest.
How is that possible?
It's working with water rather than soil, or hydroponics, which works with a vermiculite nutrient form. It's very efficient and is extremely simple to run. They're simple. It's called aquaculture.
And that's done underground?
I'm sorry?
And that can be done underground?
Yes, it can. You have different forms of LED lighting that would be appropriate for certain groups of plants that require certain frequency bands for best growth production, just like marijuana likes halogen series.
And how are you powering the LEDs?
Usually there's different ways of doing that. There's options on that, your power source. Right now, one of the ones I do right here is I have a 35 kW generator I run off of plants. I make solar alcohol.
Solar alcohol?
Yeah, that means that you're taking your biomass leaves and things like that and converting it into alcohol. You can drive an automobile like that.
What do you make of Elon Musk's proposal, this battery to power your house?
There's all different sources, from rodent coils and free energy systems. The one that is best suited out here in Oregon is, and up where you are buoys that rise and fall with the tide. Just that up and down motion generates current. And these buoys, when I was up in Nova Scotia, I saw 60-foot tidal changes on a daily basis. That's enough tidal change to probably power the entire eastern seaboard, just with rising and falling of the tide.
And what about protein?
What about protein. Well, we went to Lost Creek. Another assignment of mine was to go to the Lost Creek fish hatchery on the headwaters of the Rogue River. And they have a fish hatchery there that's in full production. And that fish hatchery had 3-year-old fish in full production that probably is enough protein to feed the entire state of Oregon.
And how are
These infrastructures are in place.
Right.
It just determined on whether and what's going to hit us first as to whether or not they're accessible or not. And so what I'm trying to do is design a sustainable lifeboat that can take into account almost everything. An ice age is a pretty difficult problem.
Right. That's lights out. That's lights out.
It's a debris trail that would make us remain look like Mars or the asteroid belt.
But you're saying that if we could weather this, even a major coronal mass ejection where the grid would be down.
The coronal mass ejection one it is really easy if you're even semi-prepared. And everybody should be doing their garden. They should be having a small garden, not so much to feed themselves, but giving them the independence of feeling at least semi-sovereign. Up in Toronto where you live, I would guess that less than 5% of the food is actually grown in Toronto that's consumed there.
The only thing we grow out here are houses.
Well, then that's an excellent way to live and a good lifestyle to aspire toward, because that's what you're really seeking, sovereignty. And sovereignty has many faces, including entertainment. If I'm going to get back to the grid thing that we could talk about, the water part is only the first part of it. There's other sections of food, for example, would be number 2. And so the rule of 3 is you've got 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. And once you get that, you realize that the food is everywhere, unless, of course, it's under snow. And so you can grow your food easily enough underground. We're already doing that on Mars. And so there are systems out of aquaculture in Japan showing how massive banks of lights are being used to grow the food underground and forever.
Let me just back you up there, Dr. Miller.
Because if we have a mini ice age, the actual drop in temperature will drop probably something like 10 degrees per second, going down to minus 100 Fahrenheit. It will be like the planet Mars. It won't last longer than probably 2 or 3 weeks. And then when you do poke your head back up on the surface to take access to sunlight as a power source, you probably will still not be able to see the Earth for another couple of years.
I want to back you up there because you mentioned something about growing food underground on Mars.
I knew you'd pick that one up.
Well, how could I not? That's news to me. We're coming up on a break, but just let's start this conversation now. What do you mean we are growing food underground
on Mars? We've been on Mars for almost 40 years. I was part of we're doing like the Mars project in Kailua right now, where we're developing these geodesic domes for the surface of Mars.
You're saying we have a manned colony?
Probably, yeah.
Underground on Mars.
When in 1968, when I was working for Boeing in 1970, I said, okay, there is an article in Veterans Today. It just came out on my childhood. That's a good article to go check out. And I talk about the Mars project there, where 1967, they tried nuclear they did a joint manned expedition to Mars 1 year before they landed on the moon. I have no idea whether that's survived or not, but that was 42 years ago. And with Stargates and the rest of these new inertialess transportation systems that Boeing and others are developing now, it's not a far cry to connect the dots and know we're already there.
All right, let's take a time out. Back on the other side with Dr. Richard Allen Miller here on The Conspiracy Show.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Quite frankly, I don't know if I'm prepared to live underground like a gopher or a mole.
Yeah.
You know, I'm.
It's pretty awful thinking about it, isn't it?
It's absolutely it's a nightmare scenario.
And yet, historically, you will see that is the recurring pattern of man with various floods and other kinds of natural disasters. They crawl out of a cave.
Underground tunnels.
If you have a mini ice age, for example, your frost lines are going to be to 10 feet up where you live.
Right.
Yes.
And
so, I mean, you're going to have something between you and that just as insulation.
Yes.
It's survivable.
It is, I suppose, if you can call it that.
Yes, and that's the deal. So,
the
other part of it is to move to a different part of the world, like Guatemala or Costa Rica. Now, even still, I personally think you're best to be with your family and your infrastructure of what you know and how you live.
How large a compound or a complex 12 feet down are you going to have to construct? And how can anyone, the average person, afford such an excavation?
They can't. That's why there's going to be mass extinction. That's the deal.
Just like that.
Well, I'm a physicist. I'm not trying to pull punches. I'm just saying it as I can say it. And basically, the movie, The Day After Tomorrow, is fairly accurate. You'll notice that even in New York City, there were survivors. I don't think burning a Gutenberg Bible is appropriate, but you get the idea.
Well,
I mean, that movie is accurate scientifically.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I have noticed they have been playing that almost on an endless loop for the last 6 months. I see that movie on the TV guide on my screen at least once every 2 weeks.
I don't know that Hollywood has an advanced warning as much as it's probably about marketing and doomsday. That's an excellent movie. It's better in many ways than the 2012 or several of the other things. In fact, the geoengineering that you mentioned is basically a United Nations project. There's other levels, or like you said, layers of the onion and that kind of thing. But basically, that was to stave off an event that should have already occurred. The Gulf Stream is changed and it's stopped. And basically, several military have told me that that's what the BP oil spill was, to stop the Gulf Stream and save off an event that should have happened earlier.
That was intentional
in Europe are all messed up now. There used to be 7 of them that we key off of. There's only 3 now that are active.
How could excuse me, Dr. Miller?
He talks about that.
But excuse me, how does
going on with the sun? The sun basically controls everything on Earth.
Oh, I agree with that. That is the one, the key ingredient, I think, to climate change.
And the sun is heating up. The heliosphere is literally heating up. There is global warming on Mars and Pluto. And if the Earth has global warming, what happens is you change the desalinization of the sea, and that's what causes a mini ice age.
I want to go back to the BP oil spill. You're saying that was intentional to forestall?
I'm saying that I was told that it was.
Right. How would that work?
I don't know that it was. I was told that it was.
What is the principle behind that? How would that work?
Well, the basic currents and the way they loop out of the Gulf Stream are what hold and stabilize our weather patterns as they are. And if that changes, the planet has to go through a reboot where you have a superstorm.
But again, I'm not sure how an oil spill would forestall that.
Well, it stopped the currents from changing.
I see.
It slowed them down. How's that? That's a better way to do it.
All right.
Slowed it down. The viscous fluid in the ocean causing it to move slightly differently than it would otherwise tend to. That's the same thing they're doing now with shielding the sun. The volcanoes going off are a warning to you. The earthquakes going off are a warning to you that things are not natural right now.
You know, you could be wrong about the timing of
rapidly.
this. You could be wrong about the timing of this.
Yes, I could.
And what is the margin of error here?
I don't know. If I did know, I'd be saying so. I don't know. I'm guessing that what I'm seeing right now, we're going to have possibly a grid collapse this year sometime. I don't know how long it'll be. And with more earthquakes and volcanoes going off, we absolutely are going to have some ocean current changes. This is because the sun is literally heating up and melting all the ice. I'm guessing the ocean sea is going to rise 60 meters, just like it did for Noah.
All right, well, there you have it.
That's my best guess,
right,
based on limited physics and information I have. There is something that is causing the sun to heat up. It isn't doing it naturally. It is a recurring event that has been written about in lots of books. The one I'm reading now by Gerald Clark is pretty good. Says something about the seventh planet, Mercury rising. That's an interesting book. His research is as an engineer, and he's solid. And so I'm impressed with his work. There are others.
So there are people in the government that are speaking quietly about this. Obviously, they don't.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me so much about that is in the movie 2012 when that guy in the White House said it's for your own good. You know, we don't want you to panic because there's nothing you can do about it anyway. The problem I have is he's not as smart as I am, and how does he have the right to make that decision for me?
Precisely. Do you suspect that not even the 1%, the 1% of the 1%, are essentially equipped to move off planet at this point?
I think they're probably aliens. How's that one sound? For blood type and genome. Who knows? Listen, these are the kinds of questions we probably, as the 99%, will never know. And the problem I'm having now with Rothschilds and the rest of it is they're in the same boat, and there's other things going on that are even creepier than the weather events. For example, CERN. CERN is basically a time machine. It's creating a time portal. I can run it down in the physics if you'd like, but basically I have this one video that talks about he's an occultist. His background in the occult is as good as my own, so it's scaring the pants off me.
Well, we have a couple minutes. Let's talk about how the CERN collider is being used as a time machine.
That's correct. They're trying to create a portal to allow what they used to call Enlil back in, Apollo, the destroyer. And it's a group trying to bring about biblical prophecy. Now, whether or not that's real, this guy's analysis of it was creepy. And he was showing the dancing that they were doing. They were doing a weird ritual dance in CERN, and it was exactly the same that the whirling dervish and Gurdjieff talked about, that changes space-time.
Well,
that is what basic certain forms of dance, like sound, will change space-time. And this whole concept of what's going on now, I don't get it. What I do know is we have an opportunity to rewrite the way the next civilization does it.
We're going to hit the reset button.
Capitalism and communism, maybe we might go into communalism and barter.
What are the just give me the basic physics behind how the CERN collider could be used as a time machine?
Created a God particle at the moment of the Big Bang. that reflected wave is a primary wave, is our past. The future is a secondary wave that you can check out on how they talk about that on physics.org. Basically, a drop of water falls and hits a pool of water, and you form a cavitation ball of exclusion zone water that traps air inside it as a toroidal surface. It is what we call the second Earth, or into the out of. It is a new form of physics from MIT with Mark Leclerc, and it's called cavitation ball. And basically, when the water drop hits the water, the outgoing wave, that's your future. There is a ingoing wave which slaps itself and creates a skin of water that captures air. And you see this behind submarines and things like that. They're called cavitation balls. And basically, inside the ball, the actual topological surface is a torus twister, just like Roger Penrose would suggest at Princeton.
That's remarkable. That's remarkable, if true. If people want to, get serious, obviously, about living off the grid for the foreseeable future, is there
I do workshops with Matt Stein. We did the RK Prepper Show in Indianapolis. There are others coming up in Atlanta and other cities, and that's where Matt Stein and I actually give presentations on preppers and what to do and, what kinds of equipment work best and so on. Matt's books, When Technology Fails, When Disaster Strikes, are exceptional books. My Power Tools for the 21st Century is basically the protocols I trained Navy SEALs with to make them Supermen. And some of that includes spirituality, where you look at things in metaphor and not focus on the big picture of disaster, because that's ever present in all of our archetypal encounters. It's just because it's the end days does not mean it has to be a bad thing.
How do we get a copy of Power Tools for the 21st Century?
You can go either to my website, richardalanmiller.com, ALAN, or you can go to oak-publishing.com.
Well, on that cheery note, and again, I want to offer this caveat. You might very well be.
It's a pleasure to work with you. I like to play with you.
You might play. Yeah. You might very well be wrong. I mean, I want to leave people with.
Yes, and it would be wonderful, but my physics says we're going right into a brick wall, and it's time to really rethink what's important in your life.
Indeed. It's never too early or too late to do that. That's for sure. Dr. Richard Alan Miller, thank you for this. Be well.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. My website, richardsarrett.com. It is not the CERN collider, but that is your portal, not to the future, not to the past, but to this radio program. Everything you need to know about The Conspiracy Show is right there, richardsarrett.com. And please say hello on Twitter at Richard Sarrett. And as always, follow the truth.
Richard Sarrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.